From the Missouri History Museum to the history of the Hill, we'll bring you up to date today on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter. Welcome to City Corner. Radio's Johnny Rabbitt hosts the Route 66 show on KMOX on Saturday nights, and he joins us here with, I guess, a little bit of everything, Ron.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, you're right.
You have so many interests that have to do with days past, not just music from the 50s and 60s, but
Right.
the history of our city and everything in between.
All right, you're right about that. Yeah, the history of music is great, though. It is wonderful, as it ties into St. Louis. You can bring, if you hear a song, I don't care what the song is, it brings back a memory. If you know that song, if you grew up with that song, whether it's Tequila by the Champs or I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, almost invariably that person, that individual who's listening to that, thinks of something in their past, in their life. And hopefully, music can conjure up good memories. Yeah, we've got a lot of hard times now. Good memories are nice to have to warm the heart.
Is there one song that you'll never get out of your head from days gone by?
Oh, you know, Joe Edwards from Blueberry Hill, I talked to him about that. Now, he really is a terrific, knowledgeable person about music. And I do a feature called Guest Music Director, where I have various people. Kim Tucci is going to be one. Mayor Slay has been one, where they give me their favorite songs. I asked for their 20 favorite songs. And Joe Edwards said, it'd have been a lot easier if you said, what are your 3,000 favorite songs? Because everyone is from a different era. It just has, it's nostalgia, and it is a great memory maker. And the nice part about it, it becomes personal for everyone. You're not playing a song that maybe everybody knows or loves, but you're going to catch certain people that's the right song.
Well, you're originally from St. Louis. You worked a lot of other places in your career also, like San Francisco comes to mind.
Right.
Probably someplace I'm forgetting.
Well, there are a few: Boston, Houston, Cincinnati, Kansas City.
So what was that? What was the first year you started DJing?
1954, June 20th, 1954, it was East St. Louis. WTMV, TMV stood for the Mississippi Valley. It was in the mezzanine of the Broadview Hotel in downtown East St. Louis, and I did a jazz show.
A jazz show,
Yeah.
no kidding.
The only type of format that I didn't do, have never done, is classical music, which I would not against it. It's never happened. And when I got into radio, that's what I got into, radio. A lot of people become a disc jockey because they like a certain type of music, whether it's jazz or rock or country. And I wanted to be in radio. And so the format didn't make any difference to me. It was how it was presented on the station.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of neat. You've been playing 50s music since the 1950s.
Since the 1950s, yeah.
Well, at least you're consistent.
Well, that's true.
Ron, last time you were here, you talked a lot about a exhibition at the Missouri History Museum, which is still up, and that's exploring Route 66
Yes,
as
it
came through this town.
Yeah, it did. It come through this town in such a big way, and all of the 8 states it covered, from Grant Park in Chicago to the Santa Monica Pier in California. The shortest stretch is through Kansas. It's only 13 and a half miles long in Kansas, but it was really impressive in St. Louis. So much has been, it was built up because of it. Manchester became famous for it. Watson Road became famous for 66. And so the exhibit at the History Museum is all about Route 66 in this area. It doesn't cover Arizona, New Mexico. It's all about here. And we have gathered so many great things. Ben Hilliker has the pivotal car in the exhibit. It's a 1926 Willis Overland touring car. And that's because that's the year the highway started, was 1926. But there's Ted Drew's original frozen custard machine from when he opened on 66 in 1941 on Chippewa. That's there. And it's just filled with memories. Coral Court has, we don't have one of the buildings. There is a Coral Court Motel building at the Museum of Transportation on Barrett Station Road, but we have the entire interior of a building, all of the furnishings and so on. And so it's fascinating for people. And the other fascinating thing is the people who literally come from all over the world to ride on Route 66. It is a magnet for people from China to England to everywhere. And I found out first at the Route 66 Museum, which is at the Route 66 State Park out on 44 off of Lewis Road. And they have a map of all these people, that dots where they came in. The last time I was there, I met 2 people who were from England, and they were just driving on it.
What do you think? I always thought maybe we should see more remembrances of Route 66, like in the St. Louis area. Like, just for an example, I drive south. I drive on Illinois Highway 3 a lot, and every time I cross the Chain of Rocks Road, that was Route 66, and there are a couple little motels still there, and it always, every time I cross that intersection, my mind just goes back to what it must have been like then. But there's no monument or little park. Do you think we could do more along those lines about recognizing places that still exist?
Well, some of it is being done. It's progressing. It's just like creating historic Route 66 routes that didn't exist a few years ago. And now there's signage, not just in St. Louis, but it's all over the country, that they're commemorating Route 66. So they are starting to mark things, and like the Route 66 State Park. Yeah, there could be more, but there aren't a lot of places left.
Right. Well, people should check out that exhibition at the Missouri History Museum.
And it's free.
And it's free
Yeah.
while it's still up. Some other things going on at the History Museum, Ron, that you're interested in too. One has to do with schools. There's a program about schools.
Yeah, and let's see, the 25th of this month.
October,
10:30 to noon, I'll be doing a program presentation on schools. Like, where did you go to high school? But it's not just high schools. It's all about education, educators, famous graduates of St. Louis schools, like a Yogi Berra or a Shelley Winters or a Vincent Price and so on. And even Vincent Price's mother created a school, a community school, which still exists out on Clayton Road. And it's going to be talking about grade schools, universities, colleges, everything to do about school. We'll be showing things like, here's this book, The Hatchet. Now that's a hefty book.
you could hurt someone with that
Whoa, that's the 1929 Washington University yearbook.
1929.
1929. This was the last of the great yearbooks because they got a lot smaller because the Depression started the next year and it wasn't quite as big. So we're going to have a lot of school yearbooks. We're going to have a lot of school newspapers like the Orange and Blue from Cleveland High School. And we're going to be talking about the future of some schools that are definitely in question, like Cleveland High School, the old Central High School, and also talk about how a lot of schools have been retrofitted, some for apartments, some for senior living, some for businesses. And the stock of schools is just terrific in St. Louis, and some of the architecture, especially that by William B. Ittner, is truly outstanding.
Yeah, right. In fact, I'm going to be doing a City Corner program right after this one on that very topic. There is a journalist who recently wrote a column for the St. Louis Magazine about all the abandoned, vacant school buildings in St. Louis. And it's really fascinating because, as you say, architecturally they're beautiful. A lot of them are in disrepair. They're for sale. But there's also a lot of possibility with those vacant buildings, too.
Yeah, there are a lot of possibilities. It is an expensive proposition, though. One of the best historic uses of a school is the old DePere School on Michigan in South St. Louis, Carondelet neighborhood. It was taken over by the Carondelet Historical Society, and they've made it into an absolutely outstanding museum. All of the artifacts from Cleveland High School that they could possibly save are there, the trophies and pictures. And they have, Susan Blow had the first public kindergarten in St. Louis, and that was in that school, and they have recreated it from photographs that it looks like the real thing. It looks like this is the way it was in whatever, the 1870s. So there can be many uses for buildings. Now some are unfortunately in really advanced states of disrepair. It doesn't mean they can't be fixed, but it does mean it's expensive. I know a group that was looking at the old Cleveland High School at one point, and they talked to the St. Louis Public Schools system, which is really interested in the schools. They're not trying to tear them down. They don't want them to go away. They'd like people to reuse them. And you can buy them very inexpensively, but they figured that it would be $250,000 a year just for heat for the schools. So that it doesn't make it that easy.
I can't remember exactly where it was, but about a year ago I visited someone I knew that was living in a St. Louis school that had been redone into condos or apartments. And that's great space for that. Could you know, like 30-foot ceilings, and 20-foot windows.
Right.
So it's great living space.
Yeah. And then there are books like, we have this one. This is the high school book. So where'd you go to high school? Well, that's one of the typical questions. Where did you go to high school, Steve?
Well, I didn't go to high school in St. Louis, but my dad went to Normandy. He was student body president there. when his father was principal.
Uh,
And my mother went to Clayton High School. They both graduated in 1948, so
Great.
that's as close as I can get.
Well, that's a darn good connection.
How about you?
I graduated from, nobody's going to know this, the Dodson School, D-O-D-S-O-N. The Dodson School was on Lindell, catty corner
troubled
across from the
children, or-
cathedral.
School for troubled children?
Probably was, because it caused a lot of trouble there. But it was a very small private school in an old stone mansion, very similar to the Archbishop's mansion. It's torn down now. It closed. It was open from 1903 to 1967. It was so small, and our high school, we had a grade school and high school in the same building. We had 12 students in the high school.
12?
12, the whole high school. That was, now here's this publication came out a few years ago. Lonnie Tedden did it, the 50s in St. Louis. A lot of it it's just sort of like a yearbook from all the schools, and a lot of it is about hangouts in St. Louis. There are a couple other books that we call Cruisin' North County, which really are geared around high schools and where people, cruise and Steak and Shake in the Halls Ferry Circle and that. But this is the great magazine.
I don't know about that.
Prom Magazine. Oh,
That one's
my
from
gosh.
1960.
Julian Miller published Prom from 1947 to 1953. And it was written for and by high school students. Every high school had two prom reporters in every issue. He would have these wonderful prom parties. He might have a party with, I was just showing someone 2 nights ago, I've created a room at the Chase Park Plaza that's open to the public called the Legacy Room. It's about memorabilia of the Chase Park Plaza. And in it, there are a lot of pictures of prom parties, like one with a very young Mick Jagger, or there's Bobby Darin, and there's Johnny Ray, and all these people. But this was a true teen magazine, and no other city in the country had a publication like this. And it came out every month, and it sold for 10 cents.
And I see there for 12 months you get a break on it, $1 for 12 months.
Yeah, wasn't that at the...
Things have
And then
changed.
I have my books, the Johnny Rabbitt trivia books.
Now, I like these books because I'm actually a question in one of them. Do you remember?
Yes, I do, but I don't remember the question.
I do. It was, I used to host the Cityscape program on St. Louis Public Radio. I did
Right.
for over 10 years. And Mike Sampson hosted it before me for a long time, and Mike passed away unexpectedly, and that's how I got the job.
Oh.
So your question is, somehow it's related to that.
Yeah, I
don't
remember it now.
exactly.
I don't...
But anyway, these are fun too, and you've used these all over town at events, and people play them. And
Oh, we play trivia games all the time. Trivia started in St. Louis in 1982 as far as games. And it's one of the very few cities in the country. You go to a lot of other cities, go to Atlanta, Seattle, they don't know about trivia nights.
They don't?
No, they don't even, what are you talking about? But here it continues. I'll be doing one November, I think it's November 4th for the 11th annual trivia night for the Little Sisters of the Poor. We'll be doing it at the Lady of the Pillar on Lindbergh, and there are tickets available for that. Just contact the Little Sisters of the Poor, and it's huge. We'll have hundreds and hundreds, 500, 600 people there.
Wow.
And it's not necessarily all St. Louis trivia, but it's heavy in St. Louis trivia. Another good source for information related to schools is Joe Edwards' book about the Walk of Fame, because in it he discusses the people who are from St. Louis and where they did go to school. Right. This is a picture of CBC. That's the old CBC that burned. It's a terrific fire. People died in it, and this was in Sherman Park on what was then Easton Avenue at Kings Highway. So when we do our program at the History Museum, we will be showing a lot of examples.
I want to stop you there. We need to take a break. When we come back, speaking of the History Museum,
Yes, sir.
they've got an exhibit that has to do with toys and things, and you brought some with you.
I did.
So we'll pick up on that when we come back.
Okay.
So more with Johnny Rabbitt right after this.
Kids will spend 15 minutes watching online videos like this one.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes, twice a day. They have the time.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. Johnny Rabbitt is our guest. You hear him Saturday nights on KMOX radio for the Route 66 program, which is music of the 50s and the 60s. And you always bring your hat with you wherever you go. So I
do.
just thought I would pick it up and look at it.
Put it on if you want.
No, I don't think so. I worked really hard on my hair.
I understand.
This would mess it up.
Yeah.
But whenever I hear you on the radio, I've told you this before, I always picture you wearing this as you're DJing, and I know you don't.
Right.
But you do wear it out in public a lot, don't you?
I wear it every time I do a program of any sort. I wear it.
As far
It's become so associated. I mean, I've been wearing that since 1962. Not the same hat. It's been different hats. But it's, I'd rather have it on than not have it on.
That makes sense. We're talking about your love of history and things going on at the Missouri History Museum, a couple of exhibits we talked about already, but there's one that has to do with toys, Ron,
Right.
and this is something I would have loved to have had as a kid. But tell me what's happening at the museum.
Well, this is going to be November 16th, Wednesday. It's from 10:30 to noon, and it'll be in the Lee Auditorium. That's where we do all our presentations. It's a large theater, but plenty of room for everybody. It's a 300-seat theater. And we have a big movie screen and a big set. So they're not going to be seeing what I brought here, because here on TV you can see them very easily, but there in a big theater you won't. So we'll have photographs of the toy. We'll have about 150 different photographs of many things that relate in some way to St. Louis. For example,
Kids might not realize today that all toys are not on a screen.
I know they don't. What do they do? Where do they? We must have 20 kids in our block. Almost never see them. Years ago, you'd see them all the time. Now look, somebody said that looked like you in this.
I've never been told I look like Vincent Price, so I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
I think it's good. Well, you couldn't find a nicer guy.
Well, and he's from St. Louis.
From St. Louis.
Right.
I grew up at 6320 Forsyth.
So this is just going to be a program at the Missouri History Museum about old games.
About games and about toys.
Well, tell me about this game. Have you played it?
Hangman? Hangman, yeah, sure. Kind of a gruesome game. Hangman was Vincent Price, and it sold very, very well. Then there's this device. This is the Lincoln Tunnel. Of course, there's nothing to do with St. Louis.
From New Jersey to New York.
Yes, and then you wind it up, and then there they go. Around and around they go. Just sort of fascinating, just to kind of watch them.
I could do that all day, which is maybe a sad commentary.
And it's very nice that something like this still exists in its original state.
When do you think that was made?
In the 30s. This is from the 1930s. I'm not sure of the exact year.
And how'd you get it?
It was my father's. It belonged to him.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's harder and harder to find things that are mechanical that still work. Yeah. This is another one. This is an interesting
That was
thing.
your dad's too, right?
Yes, yeah. That's called push-up, and it's a manual pinball game. So the little ball's there, and you send them up through there and try to get the highest score. And there's a bracket in the back that you can raise it up or lower it.
That was probably sort of like high technology at its
I
time.
would think so. And again, to have something last that long with the
And
glass
it has
cover.
images of clowns on it.
Yes, it does.
the
it's
whole scary clown thing going on
scary
right now.
clowns. Now, this is a book about games in St. Louis. What people did, what they did outside. The guy is Fred Buck, no relation to Jack Buck or that family. And he decided that, what I was just talking about, he didn't see kids in the streets anymore. And he said, do people still play leapfrog? Do they still play hide and seek, ring around the rosy? And it goes on and on. There are dozens and dozens of games, and games that were played like wiffle ball and cork ball and bottle caps and horseshoes. And so he documents what all these things are for future generations who may say, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. What is Mill, M-I-L-L-E? It was a game.
Tell me about that one. I don't know
that
either.
much about it. It seemed to be more of a girls' game. And then hopscotch, and it's a book that's no longer available. Wasn't a big seller or anything. He just did it because he thought it should be documented. And that's a lot of what happens when we do our programs at the History Museum. Try to document the past. Try to show people the way we were, and then maybe the way things are being used today. In this Toys and Games show, we're not going to do anything about computer games. Nothing's going to be current. It's all going to be things that happened before the digital age.
That's so unusual to hear nothing's going to be current, but I like that approach. You don't hear that too much.
No, you
Usually it's
don't.
the opposite in
Yeah,
everything.
that's true.
Hey, you talk about documenting things.
Yes.
There are a couple of documentaries, I guess, in the works that are really interesting. There are a couple you want to talk about. One has to do with you. In KC Radio, right?
Oh, yeah, right, the KC Radio documentary. KC Radio, it existed before, but as a rock station.
You were in the forefront of changing that format
Right,
to
I
rock
changed the
back
format.
in the day.
I created the format, was manager of the station. That was in early 1967 is when that started. So 50 years next year, which is real hard to believe. But not the station, but some independent people are making a documentary on that history. And we just did, this past week, we just did the first interview with a guy named Richard Palmese, who was one of the original DJs that I hired. He used Brother Love on the air. Some of the original DJs, Don O'Day, Prince Knight, Jack Davis, they've all passed away.
What was the mindset like back then when you were making that format change? Did it seem like a risky thing to do, or were you confident this is the direction you needed to go? Or?
Well, yeah, it was both. It was risky from the radio station management ownership standpoint, but they had to take that risk because they were going broke. The station was making no money. When I took over as manager, their average spot rate for selling 1 minute of advertising was 90 cents. So they weren't doing too well. And they really, truly, they were people out of Chicago, they truly detested the idea of a progressive rock, underground format, playing music that the AM top 40 stations weren't playing these cuts of Inagata de Vida by Iron Butterfly or Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie that were 12, 17 minutes long. So they weren't getting any airplay. And so there was a market for it. I had been in San Francisco and got to know two guys, Tom Donahue and Bobby Mitchell, that started a KSAN in San Francisco with the same format. So we were the second station in the commercial station in the country to play this kind of music. So initially, all the advertisers went away, which was okay because they weren't bringing in much money anyway. And we developed this new type of advertiser that hadn't been using radio, like record companies. But prior to that, record companies did almost all their advertising in newspapers or magazines.
And you were a record rep in your career for a while.
I was,
yeah.
for Capitol, Columbia, and RSO. And so the whole thing developed, not overnight, but pretty quickly. Within a couple of years, it was obviously this is going to be established, and the AM stations who laughed at first were saying, maybe there's something to this.
When might we be able to see this? That's pretty far down the road, this doc?
It'll be next year, but I don't know when. Literally, the first segment was just
A
recorded.
couple of other documentaries I want to ask you about. One on Martin Quigley.
Yeah, Martin Quigley, a name, not exactly a household name for today, but he was a big deal back in the, especially 50s, 60s, into the early 70s. He was a PR guy. He was a writer. He handled a PR for AAA, for example, Blue Cross Blue Shield. He was one of the founding partners of the Fleischman Hillard PR firm. A book that he really wrote, but it's credited to someone else, is Baseball is a Funny Game by Joe Garagiola. He had Joe come to his house because first he asked Joe, "Want to write all this stuff down?" I write this stuff down. Let's just talk about it. So he just recorded everything and then put it in the book. The book still is a big seller today. I think it might be the biggest baseball book ever written.
Then there's another documentary I wanted to ask you about, and that's on a place I think everybody loves, The Hill.
Ah, yes. Yeah, there's another Joe Garagiola story.
That's
He's an
because that's where he
itinerant
grew up as a
Yogi
kid,
Berra,
right?
The history of the Hill. We did a program a few months ago at the History Museum called The Hill and St. Louis's Italian Heritage, which was extremely well attended, a tremendous interest in it. And the Hill is the last really true solid ethnic community from the 19th century that exists in St. Louis, and still many of the same families. And it's right in the heart of the city. Of course, some very fine restaurants are there, and a lot of nice places to dine and so on. But it's going to be about the families and how they grew up and why they moved to the Hill. What was the Hill? What was the attraction? And a lot of it was the clay mines for making brick and terracotta and so on.
So is that doc affiliated with the History Museum? Will that be shown
No,
there?
it will be shown there, but it's not. It's being sponsored by the Hill 2000 and Hill Businessmen's Association.
The American Federation of Radio and TV Actors?
Yeah, it started
After-
out as the American Federation of Radio Artists.
Right. We call it AFTRA. I happen to know a little bit about it because I worked a long time ago at KMOX for 2 years, and I was a member of AFTRA. But I believe you're a past president, aren't you?
I was president 2 times, vice president, now I've been a board member for many years.
So they're celebrating an anniversary.
Yeah, it's going to be 80 years next year in 17, the 80th anniversary.
Well, since you have a personal relationship with that organization, what kind of impact has that had on people in our business?
I think the most important thing, it's kept salaries higher than had there not been a union. It's been good for job security, for negotiation of a contract where each individual is not negotiating their own deal. It's a unit, and everybody is behind it. It brings everybody at the radio or TV station together. The primary stations here are KMOX, WIL, Channel 5, Channel 4, Channel 2, 11, and 9 all have AFTRA contracts. And now with the association with SAG, Screen Actors Guild, we're also representing a lot of the actors in St. Louis.
Well, we could talk about a lot of other things too, but we just simply don't have time.
I understand.
How many things do you generally have going on at one time? About 2 dozen?
74.
74, just to be exact.
It seems that way, I'll tell you, but it's fun.
Anything down the road you're looking forward to?
I look forward to everything. I look forward to next year, and we have a whole year of programs already planned for the History Museum and some things at the Eugene
And you're very involved with the
Fieldhouse.
Mercantile Library too.
Oh, the Mercantile Library, I've been very involved with that. We have a program there called Audubon and Beyond, 5 Centuries of Natural History in St. Louis. A new black and white photography exhibit opening, and the Eugene Fieldhouse that we mentioned for the holiday tour, but they have their first expansion ever, and that's going to open in early December.
And something on breweries.
Oh, there's a little-known place which is on the campus of the University of Missouri of St. Louis called the State of Missouri Historical Society, not related to the History Museum, and they have a photo exhibit on breweries.
Well, Ron, you are a wealth of information, and we'll look forward to hearing you Saturday nights on KMOX for Route 66. Thanks for dropping by and sharing all this with us today.
Thank you, Steve.
It's been a pleasure. It's always good to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Potter, and thank you for watching. I hope you'll join us next time. We'll see you. Bye.